Hello everybody and welcome back to the Two Norries podcast. I am your host James Emdr, joined by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hi everyone.
Rowan is on the Go again. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Two Norries podcast. I am your host James Emdr, joined by my good friend Timmy Long.
Hi everyone.
Rowan is on the light and the sound.
Hi Rowan.
Hi Rowan. Our guest today is Stan Noote, but before we get to Stan Noote, I just want to say hi to the two ladies in the back there, Deirdre and Grace, two sisters from Watergrass Hill that subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah.
And going forward, we're going to invite patrons down into the studio to observe podcasts, meet and greet and all that.
And I think it's fantastic as well to bring you down and show you exactly where your money is going and the funding and everything that we're doing here, and just give you an opportunity to join us as well and have a chat.
Yeah,
it's very important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Timmy made sure not to drive the Maserati tonight. So that's where the money's really going. I'm only joking, there's only hiaces. But look, we'll horse straight into it. So, Stan, for the people that don't know you, will you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
Well, my name is Stan Noote, which is...
It's not Stan Noote, it's Stan Noote.
It's not, yeah.
That's my fault because I keep Stan Noote.
Oh, is it?
To everybody.
I've been called worse. Both my parents are from Cork. My dad is from Sullivan's Quay. My mum is from Greenmount Avenue. But I was reared in England. I was born in England and I was educated there until I was 11.
What part?
I was in London in the place called the Elephant and Castle. The last stop on the Northern
I had chicken wings there last week.
There you go, right, happy days. So we came back to live here when I was about 11 and we went to live in Togher, and I grew up in Togher and I spent lots of good days out in Togher, and I went to school in Cloyster Cree Street, and then I joined the Navy where I met Deirdre's husband.
Small world, isn't it?
Yeah, and I spent 20 odd years with the Navy, and I came out of there in 2017, the very start of 2017, and I've pretty much been self-employed since then.
Let's go way back. When you were growing up in London, what was it like growing up? What was school like? Had your siblings, mother and father? What was it?
Yeah, so I'm a twin. I have a twin sister, and then I have a younger brother. He's 2 years and 2 weeks younger than me, and then I have another sister who's a year younger. I mean, London was strange in lots of ways, right? It was strange because it's quite restricted. We used to come home here every year for the school holidays in the summer. The schools in England only get 6 weeks summer holidays. So we used to come home for the full 6 weeks, and we loved Ireland because of the freedom. We could get up here at 9 o'clock in the morning and go out and go slogging or go up to the Leaf Fields or whatever. Nobody cared where you were.
Why was it not like that in England?
Well, in the Elephant Castle is a really built up area.
Okay, so it's not as safe.
Well, I mean, the answer to that is no, it wasn't as safe. But we had a very restricted area. Like, it was all high-rise, where we were in a place called Wannsey Street. And it's hard to put a distance on it, but like we couldn't really go more than 3 or 4 minutes from the house in a kind of big circle, you know. Yeah. There was a little playground, and we played soccer there, and I played cricket there, as you'd be delighted to know, because you were asking me earlier on. But it was fairly restrictive, you know. We moved a lot, which I suppose at the time I maybe wasn't that aware of. So when we went to live in England first, we went to a place called Castleford up in Leeds. I have very few memories of that. And then we moved back down to London into a place called Queen's Buildings, which was effectively a slum. We moved out a couple of years later because they were knocking it, and we moved to a place called Dade Street. And we moved out of that 3 years later because they were knocking that as well. And then we moved to this place called Wannsey Street, and we were there for the last 3 years before we came back.
What was your mother and father doing over there? Were they working? Or?
My dad is a painter and decorator,
was his employment you went over there first day?
Yeah, it's funny now because it's been a while now since I spoke about this, and it just got a little bit funny in my head there. So the story is that my mum was pregnant in 1965. They weren't married. My mum was very young. My dad was relatively young, 20. My mum was only 18, not even. And they were both shipped off to London separately, and they were not to see each other. And my dad was writing to my mum, and they weren't forwarding the letters. And then my mum came home after we were born. And my dad was home, and they met, and anyway they were told they would get married a week later. No, they loved each other to bits, to be honest with you. That was the kind of forced marriage wasn't a problem. But my dad hated London. He hated every second of it, and I only found out recently he was homeless in London for a week at one stage. And then he was under, like, my dad isn't somebody to tells you a whole lot. So like what I know is really through my mum, and then just, you know, little bits of conversations with him. But he hated London. He absolutely hated it. And you know, if you, you know, and one of the things I did during my process of trying to get well, when I was dealing with the mental health issue, I put that in the past tense now, but it's still, I looked at my dad's setup, and like my dad was 23 or 24 when my baby sister was born, and he went from living in digs in London to living with a wife and 4 children pretty much overnight. And that has to be challenging. Do you know what I mean? That has to be challenging.
We'll talk about a time there where it was actually very common for people that had been pregnant out of marriage to have to get the boat.
Yeah.
Because of the shame of it, and the control Catholic Church had in this country is unbelievable.
It's crazy, and you look at it now and you just think, what a load of nonsense, but it was reality. Like, it was reality, like, yeah.
But that's still instilled in people, that form of religion, that you can't do this, if you do this you're going to hell, and that's instilled in the older generation still. You know, even myself, when religion was a massive thing in school, you know, I remember making my communion and confirmation and sitting in the chair and saying, terrified, literally terrified, going up to the priest and because I thought I was going to go on fire because I robbing a bottle of milk outside the neighbour's door or something like that, you know.
But you know, you have to think about, you know, the mothers that had to go to England that didn't have the fathers by their side. Like, what became of them? What became of the kids? You know, when you're talking about your father there hating London, you know what I was thinking of? Shane McGowan.
Oh yeah,
Shane McGowan.
His story's amazing as well.
Rural Ireland, Puckane, County Tipperary, very traditional family, over into London and just did not adapt well.
There's horror stories galore, like horror stories. My mum's no longer with us, and if she was, I probably wouldn't tell you the story. But like when we were born, there was a nun came to the hospital to take us away, and only that my mother's sister, who's my aunt, who's passed now, was there on the day, and the nun said that they had permission from the guardian to take us. She said that can't be true because she's living with me and I'm her guardian. Yeah.
That's mad, isn't it?
So I mean, your life story, well, my life story and my sister's could have been completely different. Like,
it's unbelievable.
It was a crazy world. Like, there's no two ways about it.
You were schooled in England.
I was taught Queen's English, James. Do you want me to do the party piece?
Do smart bit. Go on.
So I suppose the reason I have the party piece is I came back to live in Talca and we were taught Queen's English. We were posh, like, and this might surprise you to know, but there wasn't a lot of fellas in Talca spoke Queen's English in 1976. So we were kind of...
You stood up in the Dean Rock Estate.
That's where I lived. That's literally where I grew up, yeah. So we were kind of to put it politely, a circus act, but to put it unpolitely, we were like a freak show. A fella used to come up in the street and literally say to me, just say something, anything, so they could have a giggle. So I think about 15 I subconsciously decided to lose the accent, but you can't lose it fully. And then I developed this party piece when people would say to me, say something, I used to say to them, we have a party in my house next Thursday and I'm going down to the shop to buy 13 perfect bananas. And that's about all that's left of it at this stage.
You know, we laugh about it now, but were you bullied?
Well, that term didn't exist when I was a teenager, but I suppose in reality I was. Like,
was it tough?
We got a... Do you know what? I don't like to overstate it. Talca was a tough place to grow up, but it was a tough place to grow up no matter where you know what your background was. It was too many kids in one place. You know, people would say there wasn't a lot to do. We had loads to do. There was a football club that I was a member of. I was never involved in the GAR. We were involved in the youth club. We did the community games were amazing. Like, but it was tough. I mean, there was lots of people around there. You know, I was blessed that the people I palled with, and I suppose all their parents, like my parents, you just didn't get into trouble. Like, that wasn't the way of the world. But there was lots of mad stuff going on, and I won't mention names now, but there was a couple of well-known Cork criminal families came through around that time, you know. Yeah. And there was gangs of them hanging around Talca, and every now and then the guards would be out, you know, moving people on, but sure, they were moving us on. Do you know what I mean? So it was tough, and being the English accent was tough, and also like we stood out. I mean, people see me. I always dressed unusually. Yeah. So
you resemble dairy milk.
I don't know what that means. No.
I seen Brendan O'Carroll doing stand up.
Oh yeah.
But he came on with a purple suit and he said, "I'm dressed like a fucking dairy."
Oh
milk.
yeah. I remember. Oh yeah. But so and I suppose that was the thing. We were encouraged, particularly by my mum, to just be who you were. You know. Yeah. And it was a catch-22. You know, I wanted to be who I was and express myself the way I wanted to be, but also you're conscious of the negative stuff that comes from that, and also I think I spoke to you about this before, Timmy. Like, my self-esteem was on the floor at that stage. I didn't know that, but my self-esteem was on the floor at that stage due to all the stuff that was going on in my childhood, you know. And then you're kind of caught between it's a catch-22, you know. I want to go out and dress and talk and do the things I want to do. But you know you're going to get negative attention, and then the negative attention is kind of like sticking a dagger into a wound, you know.
Yeah, do you know, around this time as well, you were in Crease.
I was.
Wow.
Did your research, boy? Fair play.
Well, you just mentioned it 2 minutes ago. So, but what was school like for you? Were you involved in sports? Were you good in school? Like, what was going on that time?
That's a really interesting question, actually. So the first thing is that when I came back, I'm going to blow my own trumpet here. No, when I came back to live here, I was 11 and I had the mathematical ability of a 15-year-old and the English ability of a 16-year-old.
Go out there.
Yeah, so the school I went to in England had this. So the primary school in England, they only do the 3 R's. Really, they do other bits, but it's predominantly reading, writing, and arithmetic is the third R. And what they did in the school was they took people that were good at maths and English out of the class and gave them extra tutelage. Now, I wasn't the only one. There was like probably 10 or 12ish, you know. And you don't think anything of it. You're a child, like. But when I came back here, because I had no Irish, they held me back a year. I went into 5th class in Sullivan's Quay when I should have been in 6th class. And I can vividly remember in 6th class, whatever you call it, primary school, and the teacher was doing fractions and he came up on the board and I was doing them in my head. So I was bored out of my buns.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Crease, I went to Crease really because they wanted me for the cross-country running. I didn't have to do Irish over there, which was great. And the first 3 years up to the intercert were okay. I suppose I was a bright student, but I wasn't the best student. That makes sense. I wasn't really interested in education. I really wasn't interested in any kind of authority. And we were the first year in Crease to wear a full uniform. That to me was an unmitigated disaster. Like,
don't wear school uniforms in England?
No, no, we didn't in England. But in Crease there was no school uniform. So what they had done is they'd introduced it bit by bit. So
the Taiwan year and
yeah, literally. So the guys who were in 6th class or 6th year weren't wearing any uniform, and then the 5th years were wearing a jumper, and we were the first year to wear the full uniform. You know, now you look back at it and you think, like, what a load of nonsense. But to me, that was a huge deal, like being forced to wear a uniform. And then up until the intercert year, things were okay. And then my exam results at the end of 2nd year, going into, you know, the way it used to go, you went from 2nd year to 4th year. Can anybody explain that? My results were poor. My dad said to me, something has to give. So at that time I was playing football and running, and I was out training or playing a match or running a race 7 days a week. I was training with the football club 2 nights a week, training with
what football club?
Everton.
Oh yeah.
And I was training with the Toker Athletic Club 3 nights a week, and I was training after school with the school 2 nights a week as well. You know, you train after school, go home and then go straight on. So I went into the school and I told them I was giving up the running, and they didn't take it very well, if I'm honest. But you know, I said I have to, and so I gave it up. And then we went to a meeting with the Toker Athletic Club, and on the Monday I was called into the principal. This is a really good example now of how my brain works, right? So the fellow who was running the running team was a fellow called Mr. Doug, and then he called me, and then they had a chat, and they said, you know, you told us you were giving up the running, and I said I am. And he said, but you told us you were giving up the running, but you're still running with Toker. And I said, yeah, but I said I was giving up running with the school. Anyway, they said to me, look, if you're not going to run, if you're going to run with Toker, then you have to run with the school. And I said, well, that means if I don't want to run with the school, I don't have to run with Toker. Is that right? And they were, pardon my French, no, they were fucked. So I packed in the 2 of them. And with hindsight, that was an absolute disastrous move. Disastrous move. So what I know now with hindsight is that all that activity was a form of running away from the trauma I was dealing with at home. Very difficult relationship with my father.
Was there alcoholism in the home?
No, actually there wasn't.
Just the fractious relationship?
Yeah. No, my dad was never really a drinker. My mum never drank at all.
I suppose back then too, you had it was the older generation. The love thing was a massive thing where they just could not show love.
Yeah.
You know, they couldn't show emotion. You were never told you were loved.
Is he old school?
He is old school.
Is he still alive?
He is, yeah.
Have you got a good relationship with him today? Do you speak to him?
I have no relationship.
Go out that?
Yeah.
When was the last time you spoke to him?
That's a really interesting question, actually. So the last time I spoke to him was the week my mum died in January of 2000 and... You get the year right, 2018. The last time he spoke to me was about 2 years before that. Because what he did the week of the funeral was when I asked him a question, he answered somebody else.
Well, that.
It's tough, like.
The reason I'm laughing now is because of just sad, like.
It is, and
sad.
I mean, look, it's not a nice subject, and you know, do I wish it was some other way? Yes. Do I understand how we've got here? Yes. Do I have huge empathy for my dad? Absolutely. I mean, I could do a month of podcast on my dad's life story, and I only know a smidgen of it. Like, so he's had a lot of challenges, and has a lot of challenges, and he's old school, and you know, he's not going to. And I always say this all the time. My mum, that generation didn't have the opportunities we have. So look, there's three of us here, three men, and Ronan hiding in the corner there. I'm just going to pretend you're not here for a second. And here we are chatting away about this kind of thing. Like, my dad was 35, 40, 45. There's fucking no way he was doing it.
Be calling us pussies, I'd say, buddy.
But you know, it must have been really tough.
They called you shortlifter.
I know,
This is terminology. Like,
must have been really tough to be able to bottle all that stuff up and hold it together, not being able to speak to somebody like nowadays. It's okay and it's common enough to speak to a counsellor or a psychotherapist and speak about whatever's going on for you, you know. But back then, like you were put into a home.
Oh, and,
you know.
And so that's kind of part of my dad's story. Not that he was in a home, but there was a member of his family was in that scenario. Like, I tell you what, like. So obviously it's a very difficult relationship, but I have huge admiration for a couple of things about my dad. And one of them is his mental strength, because you've just said it. Like, he has dealt with an untold number of what we would consider crisis situations. He's never, as far as I'm aware, he's never spoken to anybody, certainly not professionally, about it, but he's managed to not just survive it, but he lives his life. Like, do you know what I mean? No, you know, people would say he can't be happy. That's not the question. Can he cope? And he can. So his mental strength is incredible. And during my own journey, one of the things, you know, that I came to realise is, you know, I'm fortunate that I have a bit of that in me as well.
There's a quote on the wall there. It's from Emdr in our podcast. And he says, I can't see it now because Ron is in the way, but he basically says that trauma didn't begin with no one person, so there's nobody to blame for it. But at the same time, we all have to take responsibility for it and heal together. But in your father's case, like, it's great that you have the maturity and wherewithal to look at him and say, you know what, he went through a tough time too. And what was his parents go through, and what, so it's passed on. Eventually you're going to have to fucking, right, not passing this on to my kids, you know. I'm going to have to deal with this and break the cycle.
And that's sorry. You know, that's what happens, you know.
And I made that decision when I had kids. You know, I made conscious decisions that I wasn't going to do A, B, C, D, whatever it was that my dad had done. So, for example, you talked about, you know, I mean, I don't think my dad ever said to any of us that he loved us. I could be wrong on that now, like, but I certainly have no recollection of it ever being said directly to me.
What was it like when you left school? Did you move out of home? Did you go working?
This fella's a magic wand, Ronan, is he? My dad threw me out of home a week after I was 18.
Okay. He was just waiting for you to turn into a man.
So, I'll tell you what happened. I wanted to move out when I was 17.
Okay.
And he told me I couldn't go because I was still his legal responsibility. Which is a fair point. And my mates had moved into a place in Evergreen Street. And sure, it turned out to be not what we thought it would be. And I was in and out there a lot. I mean, you know, I didn't want to be at home at all, and I was staying there overnight and getting battered when I got home for staying out overnight because I wasn't supposed to be. Anyway, you know, not long before my 18th, maybe 2 months before, the place in Evergreen Road was falling apart and fellas were moving out, and I went home and I had a chat with my mum, and, you know, I was saying to her, I'm not really sure if I want to move in there now because it doesn't look great, and she said words along the line, well, you know, your dad doesn't really want you to go anyway. So I told the lads I wasn't moving out, and I can see this like it was yesterday. Sitting in my living room in my mum and dad's house in Lame Lauren Close in Toker, just shy of midnight, and everyone was gone up to bed, and he walked into the room and he said to me, what did I tell you a year ago when you told me you wanted to move out? And I said, you told me I couldn't move out because your legal responsibility. And he said, no, I told you were gone when you were 18. I want you gone in the morning.
It's sad, isn't it?
So I moved out that night.
You wouldn't dream of saying that to your kid today, she wouldn't?
Not a chance. There was murder in the house when I left, apparently. But, you know, he didn't see, again, he didn't see, it's hard to, I mean, I don't like trying to get into his head, but he didn't see anything wrong with that. Do you know what I mean? So the answer to your question was...
you left home at 18?
I left home at 18.
Moved into Evergreen Street?
Into Evergreen Street. We then moved down to a place called Greenfield Lane, which is just around the corner. It links from where Nano Nagle is now down into the back of the tax office.
Oh, very good. I'm working over the Mary Street.
Oh, there you go, around the corner.
Yeah.
So Greenfield Lane is there from the 1850s, and we moved in there. This is a great story. 5 of us moved into a 2-bedroomed house. One of the bedrooms was smaller than the other, because when the house was empty a few years earlier, the crowd next door had knocked the wall in and robbed 6 feet of the bedroom. And the rent was 50 pence a week between us, 10 pence a week each, which we get what you pay for, lads. With no toilet, no shower. It was an outside toilet, and there was a Belfast sink. And I wouldn't say it was falling apart, but it wasn't amazing. But we didn't give a shit. Like, all we wanted was somewhere to crash, and we fellas around 7 nights a week, and we're smoking our brains out. We had to deal with all our mates. Come any night you want to, make sure you bring a notch. And we had a great time there.
Were you working?
I was working part-time in Duns at that stage. I'd been working part-time in Duns since I had gone into 5th year. Duns was a great employer back then. I don't know, it's probably still the same, I don't know, but the money was good, and they always were very good for part-timers, and I made some amazing friends in there and had great times in that. And then when I was out of home, about 18 months, maybe less, things were my head was gone at that stage, James, do you know what I mean? So like, having, the situation with my dad was bad, and then Eileen was pregnant, and fucking hell, there was all sorts of mad stuff going on.
Eileen is your wife?
She's my ex-wife now.
She's your ex-wife now. Is she from Talker as well?
No, she's from up by the South Infirmary Hospital.
Oh yeah.
The place, Kilbrogan Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyway, just there was a lot of pressure, and then I collapsed. I remember that, and I can see that like it was yesterday as well. I was going up Barrack Street, and I saw my mum ahead of me, and I just collapsed. I was 6 stone. I was 19 and a half years of age. I was 6 stone. Like, I was always a greyhound breed anyway. Like,
yeah.
But sure, I hadn't eaten properly for. So like, I used to go to my mum's place nearly every Sunday. I'd go up, but if my dad was there, I wouldn't go in. Like, I'd leave, and she was there nearly every Sunday. So I had that. In the year and a half I was out of home, I'd lucky if I had 5 proper meals. We were living on smash, instant smash. We were robbing it out of Duns with the rubbish. We used to put out on the Thursday night with the rubbish bag of it.
So do you know when your ex got pregnant? Yeah. Did you move in with her, or did you get married, or how did that work?
So we didn't move in immediately. Fucking hell, I'm telling you, like magic wand.
This way I'm doing the job.
Yeah. So like, there was a lot of tension around that time. Yeah. My mum was traumatised because she was reliving her own trauma, which I didn't realise at the time. It would have been a maturity, Deirdre, that I realised that. My dad was brilliant in that situation. He was absolutely brilliant. Eileen's mum and dad were very religious. Her dad was very close to being a priest. They didn't take it so well. So my mum hadn't taken it well, they hadn't taken it well, and then my mum and her mum got together, and oh Jesus Christ, it turned into it was pretty much a nightmare. So we moved in together. My dad was born on the 15th of October, and we moved in together the day after our christening. And if you don't mind, I won't get into the story about the christening. That was a mad story altogether. That was kind of a breaking point, Can you give us really in a nutshell now? Well, in a nutshell, there was a standoff in the church. And when we came out, her mum said to Eileen, come on, you get into the car. She wasn't driving, get into the car and come home. And Eileen said, I'm not going home. And she said, well, if you don't come home tonight, you're not coming home at all. So that's fucking real Coronation Street stuff, isn't it? Coronation Street stuff, yeah.
But back then you were told how it was, and that's it. Because a similar situation would have happened in my own family. My mother, being told that when I was born, and that if my grandparents would take care of me and bring me up as their own child, if she didn't marry my father at the time, and that was the reality of it, but they didn't never turn their back on her, but she suffered severely then with her mental health over a relationship like that.
So even my own mum, got pregnant on my brother Keith when she was 17, and so she had to move to Dublin then to marry my dad when they were probably never compatible anyway, and ended up staying together for a long time and having 4 kids, but
it's just how it happens.
It was either that or mother and baby homes, or England.
Yeah, and I mean, you said it a while ago. I mean, it's not on my side, because certainly my mum and dad were never religious. I was giggling at you a while ago talking about your communion, your confirmation. I made my communion 3 weeks before I made my confirmation, because we didn't. We went to a non-denominational school in England, so there was no communion. And then what happens? We were coming up to the confirmation, and I went home one day and I said, they're all talking about this communion thing. So we had to, it was accelerated. So there wasn't a real religious thing on my side. But having said that, there was a lot of trauma on my side. I mean, my mum was really traumatised and being re-traumatised. And I'm sure my dad was as well, even though he was much calmer about it. My mum was devastated. And then on Eileen's side, there was a religious element to it. I wouldn't say that her mum and dad were fanatically religious, but there was an element of that. But also then there was this family thing where people come together to try and defend Eileen's situation or whatever, you know, and it just became like, it's like a coronation. I have never described it like that actually, but it was like a Coronation Street script.
Like we'll never watch EastEnders or Coronation Street where there's a christening or a funeral or a wedding goes clean through and they finish and go home after
I don't
the church.
watch those shows at all, but I know exactly.
Neither do I, but I've seen enough glimpses of them to know how it goes. But anyway, if we speed it on a little bit, so after the christening, you have a baby, you have a partner. What happened then?
We moved into a flat in Tolkien. It was a council flat. It was in a family member's name, and we kind of winged into that. Yeah. We moved in there in November, and then I joined the Naval Service on the 9th of December because I'd applied for it earlier in the year and I got the shout.
What age were you?
I went in December 85, so I was just gone past my 20th birthday.
I was 2 months old in December 85.
You're young.
What was it like in the 80s or in the Navy?
The Navy was brilliant for me, and it's only with hindsight. Well, not just with hindsight, I think, because a lot of awareness helps you. So it was a brilliant distraction for me at the time. Now, Eileen was in the flat then on her own with Adele quite a lot of the time. Because we were kept in, do you know what I mean? So we'd get out the weekend on a Saturday from 4 to 7. Eileen would come to Cove, or I'd come up for we'd get an odd weekend and that kind of thing. But what the Navy did for me was it what's the term I'm looking for?
Structure.
Yeah, structure, but it cocooned me. Do you know what I mean? Because you were so busy, like you're up at 5 in the morning, you're doing EMAs, that's a technical term, early morning activities, and your whole day is mapped out for you, and you're on the move. And then you just fall into bed and sleep like a log because you're exhausted. Yeah. But then with hindsight, when I was in therapy, you start to learn things. And one of the things I did for a long time when I started dealing with the mental health issue, which got me at 42 actually, was I started looking at dream analysis, because I used to have these and I still do have really vivid dreams. And you can look at dreams in lots of ways, and sometimes when you read a dream analysis, it's like looking at a legal letter, it says it can mean this, but it can also mean this, and they're almost the opposite of each other, But there are common traits in dreams that are kind of, if you want, indisputable, and one of them is that the vast majority of people's dreams are based in the house they grew up in. And the reason for that is most of your dreams are based in the place you felt the safest during your life. And all my dreams, to this day, are based in the Naval Service.
Go out there.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is. What you bring up a good point there. I'd love to have
I was thinking the same.
A psychoanalyst on the podcast talking about that. And there's another good podcast, This Jungian Life.
I'm just laughing there. Something popped into my head.
Well, Carl Jung, psychoanalyst. But Jungian psychologists, they analyse dreams. But This Jungian Life is a great podcast for all stuff related to that, and it simplifies it. But interesting stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was the Navy like? You were in there for a long time.
So I did 21 years in the Navy.
Did you have a few sprags, a few kids?
So Adele was born in 85, just before I went in there. Letitia, my second girl, was born in 89 while I was on my NCO's course. We never said we wouldn't have any more kids. And then, I have to get the years right because I get myself in trouble otherwise. I went to sea in 93, and Eileen was pregnant on Stanley in 94. Young Stanley, so we had 3, and then we had a conversation. You know what? Maybe we've enough now at this stage. We were very young, like we weren't even 30 at that stage. So we made a decision that we wouldn't have any more, and Eileen made, because obviously I was away a lot, like so Eileen was doing all the planning. So she made an appointment with the family planning clinic in Tuckey Street. And when we went into the family planning clinic in Tuckey Street, Eileen had a pregnancy test. This was me having a conversation with them about having the snip. What's the technical term for the snip? Vasectomy, and it was positive, so we went to see this guy, and I'm fucking laughing, oh God love him. He went through the details. He said, "Are you sure you don't want any more kids?" He said, "You're very young, to be making that decision." And I just looked at him and said, "Take that fucking test out of your pocket there and show it to him." And he just said, "Okay." So we'd 4.
What was the 4th called?
The 4th is Jamie.
Yeah. What year was he born?
96.
So you were in the Navy for 11 years at that stage.
Yeah.
Did you miss out a lot of the time in the early years of the kids' lives?
So I had always said when I went in I was only going to do 21 anyway, because you have the pension at 21, and in my brain you're working for like half your wages at that stage, right?
Yeah.
But actually when we got to that period, so I had the 21 done, let me get not as good as the maths, which you I'd say. I came out in 2007. So Stanley was 10, 11 at that stage, and I'd made a decision. So I'd been on the base for 4 years prior to that. So from the time Stanley was 7 and Jamie was 5, I'd been at home. I said to myself, I don't want to miss out on as much as I missed out with the 2 girls. I was much younger, and if I'm really honest, at the time I didn't really feel I was missing out. I was 20, 21, 22, 23. I mean, you're just getting on with it, you know what I mean? And, and of course, I not mad stuff in my head about careers and all that. But I did make that decision when I was coming out. That was one of the other reasons I wanted to have the time with the kids and not be ringing them up and saying happy birthday from Rathmullen or wherever it was at the time, So you do miss out a bit, and there's a lot of talk in the Navy, and I have to say they're very good at giving credit to the wives and partners, because we can't do that job unless they're incredible people, and they are incredible people. Like Eileen, basically for whatever amount of time is at sea, 5, 6, 7 years, and then time you're away doing career courses and other stuff. She reared those kids on her own. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
We actually spoke about this last week around, history is full of noble men and heroes and warriors and all these people, but there's no mention of the women that actually kept the societies going when the men were out butchering each other,
Well, you mean it's that old saying, isn't it, behind every great man?
Yeah.
You can't really go out and do whatever it is you want to do with your life, especially if you're married, unless there's somebody and thankfully that's gone the other way now as well.
And
that there's lots of great women out there now.
And there's lots of great men behind great men.
That's true too, yeah.
But anyhow, listen, at what point in your life did you struggle with your issues around your mental health? And how did that progress? Did something happen? Was there one big thing happened?
That's a great question. I told my mum when I was 17 that I thought I was depressed.
Okay.
And she said to me, "You're too young." No, I'm not being critical of my mum. That was 1982. That was kind of where we were at that time. Do you know what I mean? But with hindsight, I was definitely really struggling at that stage, and that was not long before I left home. My dad threw me out, and I really struggled for a long time after that. And then there was periods that I can look back on. So my first run at sea in 88 on the Emdr, I spent a week in my cabin, sick, when I wasn't sick. And every time I went to sea, I had that, you know what I mean? There was in 2001, I spent a week in the cabin on the Ashling listening to a Counting Crows song called Amy Hit the Atmosphere over and over and over again. And one of the lines in the song is, today is just a day fading into another, and that can't be what a life is for. So it was always there.
Were you on meds at that?
No, I had no diagnosis. I had literally had no, and that's one of the things that, I say to lots of people, it is amazing that you can look back on your life. So I used to say to Eileen, not regularly, but I definitely said it, more than 10 times, I can feel a big black cloud coming. And yet I had no concept that I might have a mental health issue.
Any suicidal ideation or anything like that?
No, I had what they call transient suicide thoughts is what I had. So,
they come and go.
Huh?
They come and go.
No, they come and they go like that. So, I might be driving a car and look at a lorry coming towards me and say, I wonder what happened if I drive into that. But there's no real intention there, do you know what I mean? It just comes
What's
and
that called?
Transient suicide thoughts.
Do
you
know what?
Psychoanalyst told me that, actually.
It's actually very interesting, because I too would have had thoughts like that about driving over the cliff and into whatever, do you know? And I always wondered, did anybody else think like that? And it's a very, very good point to me, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that probably have the same thing going on.
Yeah.
And like it's not a really strong thought to really push somebody over the line. Sure, it's not.
No.
Because in the back of your mind, that all right, this is just, whoa, it's kind of, that's just a thought kind of thing.
But it's really important for me anyway. It was really important because, I mean, I wouldn't have them a lot. I remember the one that struck me the most was when I was on medication. Probably the first time I was ever on medication for mental health, and I came down out of bed one night about 3 o'clock. I was total insomniac at that stage, and I went to make a cup of tea, and the medication was up next to the tea bags, and I remember thinking, Jesus, I could take all of them now, and actually kind of going, Jesus, like what?
Yeah.
But it wasn't long after I went to a talk by Alan Quinlan, the rugby player, and this is where the magic is for me in people sharing their story. So there was 3 people spoke at that. Alan Quinlan, a guy from, he was down Kerry somewhere, he was a civil servant, he was really interesting, and some psychoanalysis professor something or other. And it was the professor talked about the transient suicide thoughts. Now the talk was brilliant, Alan Quinlan was absolutely amazing, but that was the big thing I took away from that, as in I don't have to worry about the fact that 3 weeks ago, for a split second, I thought, what would happen if I was going to take all of them? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because you do, like, it can be, well, not, for me, it was actually frightening.
I'd be interested in finding out a little bit more about that, because of the depth of it. Where does it actually come from,
Yeah. That's an interesting question.
Has Alan Quinlan got his own story?
Yeah. So he was left out of the Lions. He was left out of the Lions squad, and he was devastated, like, and went into a deep depression.
Is he open about it?
Yeah. That's what he did the talk on.
We might get him, man.
Absolutely brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant, like.
When was that, Stan? Sorry, James.
Go on, alright.
When was that? A few years ago?
That's a good few years ago now.
Was it?
I was diagnosed in 2006. Didn't really start doing anything until 2008.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably 2011 or 12, give or take, somewhere around there. Like.
Do you know about the transient suicidal ideation that comes and goes? A few weeks ago, we were up in Talker out in the bars watching at a Thai boxing event with Shawnee Kinsella, who was on the podcast a few weeks ago from Dublin. Hi, Shawnee. But I was talking to Shawnee.
Hi, Shawnee.
I was talking to Shawnee. Do you know what I get? Thoughts. I could be walking down the street or walking anywhere, and I get this mad thought where somebody's just going to assault me. Somebody's going to come up behind me with a bar and wear it offside my head. And it's like, I look over my shoulder, or I could be with my wife walking the dogs, and I get somebody's going to come up in the car. If I see a car pulling in, somebody's going to come up and stab me to death.
There's a good reason from that.
Do you know what I think that comes from? In our previous lives, violence like that would have been
prevalent. It was happening.
Would have been like. You know,
when you say previous life, you mean previous life, or when you were?
When I was in Diction, like when I was in Diction, I would have been stabbed. There would have been a lot of fighting and stuff like that. So, but that hypervigilance doesn't leave you. I think the amygdala, that part of the brain that it knows you're in danger before you know you're in danger. You know, but I think that part is very strong. But it comes and it goes. It just comes. I don't judge it. It's gone again. It's always very violent.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting you say that, because one of the things that I learned in therapy was that. So I did a year of what's called Emdr Therapy.
Oh, I know the one. Yeah, we're going to get Gus Murray on the podcast.
Yeah, that's a really interesting process. So what they do in that with Emdr Therapy is they replicate your REM sleep process.
Yeah.
So the science behind it is that when you go into your REM sleep process, that's your brain filing away the experiences of the day. But when you've been traumatized, that process breaks down, and you get a lot of stuff filed incorrectly, and so it's held in your body. And when I was doing that EMDR therapy for a year, I mean, I got a shooting pain out the back of my car from one of the sessions. I'll never forget it as long as I live. The only way I can describe it was like somebody had attacked me with a saber from fucking Star Wars or something, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I left an awful lot of stuff out of my body during that 12 months. But the thing that became very clear, so that's where the phrase running away came from. She said to me at one stage, when she asked me about my childhood, and I'm telling you there's 7 days a week, constant activity, And she said to me, was there any chance you might have been running away? It was like being hit with a baseball bat, when you're somebody. Yeah. Anyway, she was saying that because of the childhood experience I had, so I didn't live with my dad until I was 4, right? Because I was here in Cork, and by the time I was 7, I was terrified of him, and I mean terrified, like. And I spent my life from the age of 5, probably until I was 40 odd years of age, and started to deal with the mental health issue on high alert, but on extreme high alert, and that's what you're talking about. Yeah. So, like, for me, sometimes, when you're in really good form, it wouldn't affect you, but other days it could be the smallest thing would trigger you, like. But so she kind of put it to me that, if you're, let's just say, the line of my mouth is where your nervous system should be operating, I was like at the ceiling, but that was my norm. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd lived there for so long, that was my norm. So part of the process with the EMDR therapy was to bring my nervous system back to a closer normal thing, and that's 100% true. And so that's a big part of post-traumatic stress disorder as well, as you probably know. You get these stories about, going back to what we were talking about earlier on with Ronan veterans, and they're walking down the street and they hear a big bang, and
you have 3 levels there. You have 3 levels of beta, right? They're brainwave frequencies, right? And the top one, the highest one, 3, is when you're hypervigilant, when you're on fight or flight. Yeah. You can't retain information. You can't logically understand anything because you're constantly watching over your shoulder. I understand that completely because I lived in that for most of my life. Then you have the one in between is where it's school and you're really trying to focus on the teacher, and the other one then beta. The lower one is where you're just kind of balanced, relaxed. And then you've alpha and theta, ones underneath that, and they're meditative kind of areas where people get to in the meditative state. Yeah. When they're meditating, when you can change the core beliefs and change all these different things in the background, But a lot of people go through their lives living in that state of being. You know, I did, and meditation was the key. Like, everybody's their own way of dealing with it. Some people medication, and some people meditation, some people therapy, some people understanding, philosophy and stuff.
On the 18th of January we've got Dr. Bessel van der Kolk coming on the podcast via Zoom.
Yeah.
But he's booked The Body Keeps the Score, which we've referenced here numerous times. But he talks about meditation and mindfulness being key. Dance, art, drama, all these things, anything that kind of brings people together, that kind of reconnects your body with your mind with your body,
And also connect you with other people. I saw Paul Merson, the ex-footballer, interviewed on Sky News a couple of months ago, and he said something that I'll tell you now, I will never forget it. I think I said this to you before, Timmy. He said, addiction wants you on your own. I swear to God,
it's true, isn't it?
I nearly fell off the sofa. Now, I've never been in addiction, right? But to me, the mental health is the same thing. So when I'm not well in my head, and certainly back a long time ago when I was really unwell and I had no idea what was going on, it wants you on your own. So that, those experiences of being in a cabin on my own for a week, sure, it's feasting on me. Like, it's feasting on me, you know what I mean? So, but for me then, Timmy, it's a combination of lots of things. So I don't meditate, actually. Just when we talk about it, I don't actually meditate in the way I used to meditate. But I go to the Kingsley in the morning, and what I decided to do there a couple of months ago is my last 10 minutes in the Kingsley, I just stand in the hydro pool looking out over the River Lee, and that's a form of meditation for me. Yeah. And, I practice gratitude, I do journaling. If anyone's listening now who's a mental health issue, saying, geez, I'm never going to be able to do all that. But creativity, James, like for me, I started writing when I was dealing with a mental health issue, and I didn't even know I had a mental health issue. Prior to my diagnosis, I started writing. And I know categorically now, 100%, nobody will ever tell me any different, that I started writing because I needed to express the pain that was in me. It was something in me said, this is the way.
What were you writing?
I started writing short stories. The first story I ever wrote, you couldn't make this crap up. It's called Grey Skies. And it's written about a guy standing on the top of a cliff in the pissing rain thinking of jumping, and he doesn't. And that's like... So a lot of my writing in the early days was really dark. I would have said at the time that it wasn't autobiographical. Jesus, when I look back on it, no, like...
Have you got them in a collection?
I've 6 of them. Did I give you one of them recently? Yeah. So I've 6 of them in this little thing called One Short Story to be Told. And I have them at home. I haven't done anything with them now for years. I've just left them there. But actually, I'll tell you now, before I go on to anything else, I wrote a story that's in one of those books. And the story came to me one night when I was sitting in my bedroom doing the morning pages, which I was supposed to do in the morning. I was doing them at 7 o'clock at night, right? I can't be prosecuted for anything I say, can I? So... we had a guy called to the house. My missus had him in the bedroom next door. He was putting in a dodgy multi-channel box for us, right? Happy days. Happy days.
The black box.
And I was scribbling away, and he said something. And whatever happened, I just wrote down, "There's a criminal in my house at the moment," and that became the opening line of a story, right? And the story was about a kid, and I left the sex of the child, the gender of the child, deliberately vague.
Yeah.
Living in a house where they were being sexually abused. Now, I was never sexually abused, right? So that's why I was convinced it wasn't autobiographical, right? And when I finished the story, titles are really hard, and I was trying to think of a title for it, and I came up with a title called Home. And 5 years later, I read the story and went, oh my God. Forget the sexual abuse element of the story. Everything else in the story, the fear that child was experiencing in that story, I might even cry,
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah.
That was me.
Did you find
I called it Home.
Did you find it therapeutic?
I would honestly say to you that if I hadn't started writing and been creative, I'm not sure I would have come through it.
But even like people that suffer with depression and other mental illnesses and mental health issues, journaling is something that's
massive.
To be able to express, like,
massive.
Express yourself on paper. But even art, like I have a art set at home. I have a clear plastic box like that over in the corner, and have my canvases in there and my oil paints, my watercolours and stuff. But when you're fucking demented, even when I was doing my painting apprentice, and I spoke about this recently, when you're doing so, and I play the PlayStation every so often as well, makes it you do nothing but think about what you're actually doing.
So my belief is that we're all on this planet to be creative, and people say to me that's bullshit. But actually, if you think about it, we have this thing in our heads that being creative has been like my brother, right?
Yeah.
Fucking superstar, amazing painter, or I don't know, Sinead O'Connor or Joseph O'Connor or brother, whatever, right? That's not that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
But we're all creating our own life. I mean, whoever put this studio together, and I'm saying that's you're creating something. If you're raising a family, you're creating a home. Like I worked with guys in the Navy, military organisation. They say, "Sure, I'm not a bit creative. We should have designing training courses and delivering training courses." That's creative. It depends on how you look at it, right? But I'm a disciple of a woman called Julia Cameron. She's a book called The Artist's Way, which is about getting in touch with your creative self, right? And I practice her 3 practices continually as best I can. And when I'm doing those, which I'm doing at the moment, I am always in great form. And I will go to my grave telling everybody who ever wants to hear me saying it. I don't care what the creative practice is, whether it's a jigsaw or I made a castle out of a cardboard box on Saturday morning, right? Like a child, but the joy of it. Or whether it's, pottery or painting or drawing or writing or whatever else it is, right? There's scientific proof that when you're doing that, your brain goes into a completely different space, and it's a healing space. So whether you're drawing or writing or creating something directly or indirectly related to whatever is going on with you, whatever the trauma is or whatever the shame is or the guilt is, you're healing just by being in a creative space.
I was listening to a podcast last week. Here's another plug for another podcast I did not on.
Listen to the 2 Norries, listen to the other ones.
Philosophize this. They complement what we speak about really well, actually. The philosophy of creativity. Simone Beauvoir, I think.
I've heard that name.
Right,
actually.
but she was talking basically in a nutshell. Creative people are unhappy with their current life, their social context, so they create stuff to make up meaning and to make it more bearable. She's an existentialist philosopher.
I
and
agree
people that are content with their lives and happy with their surroundings, they're less creative because they don't feel the need to actually improve everything. Do you know what I mean? I just thought it was interesting way of looking at it.
There's some truth in that. So I was super, and I am still super creative, but if I'm not feeling great, we all have things that we can go to, and I'm very fortunate now. I have a lot of things I can go to and a lot of people I can go to, right? That doesn't mean I don't fall down the well every now and then. I do. But if I'm feeling agitated, I can go and and I do lots of different creative things now. Some days writing can be really tough, but I might create a bit of art on the computer, or I might go and get out a canvas and always feel better afterwards. Always.
Does the black cloud creep up in you every now and then, or is it a distant memory?
No, I wish it was. For a long time, James, I was adamant that I'd find a cure, but I don't think you do find a cure. That's just my experience.
You just learn to be able to.
Yeah.
Life gives you tools to be able to deal with them, and one of the most important tools to have within your life is acceptance around whatever way you're feeling at any moment and surrender into it. As a fighter, as somebody that fought every way up in my life, as you know, when I surrendered into the way I was feeling, based on the trauma that I experienced as a young child, not knowing what it actually was, my life changed. It was tough. There was a lot of shame there that was passed on to me, generational shame. There was a lot of fear, guilt. It was all passed on. It was passed on from the church. It was passed on from different school, whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you can just look at it, right? Don't start analysing whatever's going on in your head or whatever's going on here in your tummy or whatever. Just surrender it and say, this is happening to me now. And you're taking the power out of it in terms of the initial power, and it gets easier and easier and easier. But if you ruminate on that thought, you will make things 100 times worse, because you will ingrain this planted thought within your mind that it'll just want to come up and up and up and up and up. And I know we're talking a little bit of science here, but it's very important. It's just acceptance and surrender are 2 very, very important words.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm on medication since last November. I kind of tipped in and out of it at different times, and I was never really happy with it. But I had a really bad month last November. The whole month, literally, was just... I took 2 weeks off, and it was the 1st November. I'm actually laughing now, because yesterday was the 1st November, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
So literally the 1st November, I went out for a walk for about 4 hours. My head was gone, and I spoke to 2 or 3 people on the phone, and then I thought, right, I need to take a couple of weeks off, and I took 2 weeks off, closed everything, and 2 weeks later I was exactly the same. Couldn't get off the sofa. So I went back to the doctor, back to the therapist, etc., and we went on medication, and this time, you know, we got it right, and I'm on it, and I've no notions of coming off it, to be honest with you. Absolutely not. Why would I? I still have, you know, I get the odd dip. I keep a mood journal every night, and the last couple of months there was, you know, ups and downs and a couple of really tough days.
Yeah.
Today is my 20th or 21st successively what I would call excellent day. In that period, last Sunday, I was exhausted and I did nothing, but that was just tiredness.
Yeah. Isn't it great though?
It's brilliant, and like so, you know what? For me, what happens is I get complacent, right? So at the moment, because I'm doing this journaling thing in the morning from the Julia Cameron thing, the morning page. On the top of that, I write down the same things. So I've got them written down for tomorrow morning. The artist way 3. If I'm doing the walking and the artist date and the morning pages and getting to the gym and prioritising those things, then I know I'm good. What happens is when I feel really good, I start to get complacent. I leave them go, and then you're going down that slippery slope. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're gone. So like today, I was doing, you know, I was busy tipping away doing lots of things, and I had to take stuff into a client of mine, and I'm in Glasheen, on the south side.
The posh part of Toker.
The very posh part of Toker. You could throw a stone from my house to Toker.
Where you're destroyed by students.
Yeah, exactly. But I decided she's in 98th Street, which is in behind Lennox's, and I walked in and I walked back because the walk is priority.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, one of the I like with hindsight is such a wonderful thing. I became self-employed predominantly because I didn't want to work for anybody else, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of me. I'm kind of anti-authoritarian, and I don't want to be for people telling me what to do. But actually, there was something else going on in my brain, telling me that if I really wanted to get well, I had to be in control of what I was doing. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, the blessing for me is that I don't have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and turn up at a factory at 8 o'clock. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's, you know, there's great money in it, and lots of fellas love it. But that kind of life would make it more difficult for me to do the morning pages and to do the creative stuff that keeps me really, really well. You know what I mean?
You're self-employed, so what are you doing today? Like in this moment in your life?
So Jesus, how long have you got?
About 2 minutes.
So I've got two strands to the same business, a print and embroidery business. One is geared towards businesses in the Defence Forces. The other one is geared towards my own creativity. I have a whole range of pure cork products, mugs, T-shirts.
We have mugs,
that stuff.
Great, yeah.
I'm working on a poetry collection which is nearly done, and yesterday I wrote the final word in a kid's book that I've been working on for 11 years. Not the book, but the whole idea. I have a collection of art pieces that I'm trying to find a place to do an exhibition for. I've got a new video coming out next week. It's a Christmas song. I can't tell you more than that about it. It's a classic Christmas song rewritten by Stan Noote in my mad fucking way I do it. So yeah, I've loads going on.
And you did I want to say this as well, right? We're in November now. Yeah. So we're gonna collaborate and get a few Two Norries podcast mugs.
Yeah.
If people want to stick in orders to us via email, contact@thetwonorriespodcast.com.
Yeah.
We'll take a list of orders and we'll link with yourselves and we'll get them sent out to people for Christmas.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah,
no
so we might
be delighted to help.
Yeah, so people want to have inquiries about that, give us an email, not Instagram, email. Because it's more manageable.
Instagram these days,
it's more manageable to do via the email.
Look, I'll do a couple of images and I'll get them to Rowan and you can throw them up and
exactly.
Have a bit of fun with it. Like.
You made a great video about Timmy's wife Nicole a few months ago. She made you take off your shoes coming into the house. I laughed at that.
I mean, she's such a great sense of humour, like, and that was such fun. But that's kind of how my brain works, James. You know, I've got one in my head at the moment. And I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but you know the way we're opening up with the COVID thing and we've got these different restrictions in different places. So what I've been wondering is like, what's the protocols of trying to shift someone in a nightclub?
I know,
that's a good one.
So
is there a bunker in between?
Well, you see, I can't give away too much information, but that'll be coming up. But the one with Nicole, I mean, she's just got such a great sense of humour. I mean,
she's got someone.
Timmy said to me, you'll have to take your shoes off now before you come in. I kind of looked at him.
Your man took off his shoes, he had 2 odd socks.
2 odd socks. I always have odd socks, and life's way too short for matching socks, lads.
Yeah, I make sure when I call up to Timmy,
he looked at me and he says,
I have good socks on. Like.
He looks at me and says,
yeah, what would you do if you had a hole in your sock? Like,
you're in trouble.
You'd be mortified.
The dog be licking your toenail.
Trust me, it's better than walking in my shoes.
She came out towards the door just after I took the shoes off, and I got just the way I am. I said to her, "Come here to me. Do I actually have?" But she's so funny, like, and it was actually Nicole said to me when I left, "You should write a poem about that." So I did, and it was great.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Where can people catch the most up-to-date stuff that you make?
So there's a website, stannotecreations.ie. There's a Facebook page, and there's an Instagram page. I'm actually talking to somebody at the moment about trying to give me a hand because I'm so bad at updating social media. Like, it's just I don't know, it's a great tool, right? And lots of people like you guys use it really well. But I've just got, like, this sounds terrible, I've just got way more better things to be doing in my head. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe there's a student out there would like to come on board.
Jesus, if there's anybody out there that would want to give me a hand updating Facebook and Instagram, just give me a shout. I'd love to have somebody give me a hand.
We'll leave all your links in the description of the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And listen, more than welcome. Thanks for traumatising me again.
You're very welcome.
Shattered after that.
Listen, thanks for coming on and being so open with us.
No, thanks.
That's very important what you just said there about bringing up emotions and stuff. And myself and James have spoke about it in the past when we do have guests on. How do we deal with people that have brought up? But what we usually do is we look at the person before we bring them on the show and make sure that they're able to talk about their stuff, you know. If it was somebody that we thought wouldn't be able to,
you've got a lot of tools in your locker.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's one of the things I do. I do comedy as a deflection.
I know,
you know what
tongue in cheek.
We all do.
I know, we get it.
But I'm always happy to talk because it's good for me first and foremost. I know now that somewhere along the line tonight there's been some bit of healing in there for me.
And somebody's going to listen to this.
And please God.
And get a little bit of hope as well.
And like that's the thing, my journey started with somebody else telling me their story.
Exactly.
And all along the way, whether it was Alan Quinlan or, you know, the workshops I've attended or whatever, there's always somebody will say something to you in that environment where you kind of go, okay, I can take something from that.
To an Irish podcast style. Yeah. But thanks a million.
No, you're more than welcome. Thank you. And
listen,
best of luck with it, lads. It's an amazing project you're working on, and I hope it keeps growing for you.
On the ball, Stan. And thanks to the two ladies. You've been a lovely audience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron, and I'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Ron.